Wow. What a, what a fantastic video and what an energizing event. My name is Henrik Holland. After nearly 2 decades working in global energy, I joined Prologis earlier this year to spearhead Prologis' groundbreaking effort in electric mobility. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Energy and Sustainability panel. With COP26 around the corner and the effects of climate change ever more visible, there couldn't be a more topical subject. Now, I'm a little alone on stage today, but joining me virtually to talk about their passions and priorities for energy and sustainability are 4 formidable speakers. And we're going to dive straight in with a lightning round of introductions. Dear panelists, I would like to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves by sharing with us, just in a few words, what you care about most passionately as it comes to energy and sustainability. Congresswoman Barragan, may I start with you, please?
Sure. I'm Congresswoman Nanette Barragan, representing California's 44th district, including the ports of Los Angeles. I believe the biggest sustainability problem our society is facing is that we have much of the technology to address the climate crisis, but we need to do a better job to deploy it into the skills necessary for our economy. This is a policy challenge, it's a business challenge, and a challenge of political will. I'm looking forward to our discussion today of how we can work together to bring the clean energy future to the present faster.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Eric, if I may ask you to introduce yourself and G&A. Looks like Eric is on mute.
There we go. We got
There
this.
we go. We're all used to it. It happens.
Thanks for having me. My name is Eric Niandros. I'm the CEO of Gladstein Niandros & Associates, or G&A. We are a consulting firm. We work in the commercial transportation space. So we work with big corporate fleets. We work with the big truck manufacturers. We work with all kinds of other stakeholders, utilities, ports, government agencies, environmental nonprofits, and many others. And I think for me, the thing that I'm most passionate about, it's really the core of what we do, is trying to help our customers to navigate the inevitable change. What I often talk about is this complete transformation from a petroleum combustion-based transportation economy to one that in 30 years will be zero emission and low carbon fuels. And what we really do, and what gets me excited, is to be able to realize success in helping our customers to not only navigate that, but to do that in a way that is economically sustainable, as well as the environmental sustainability piece. So it's important in the businesses that we work in that we do it in that order. And when we do, that's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. And then we have Hugh Phillips joining us out of London. So Hugh, thank you. I know it's a little late where you are, but this virtual event, it's great that you're able to join us.
It's a pleasure, thank you. So I'm Hugh Phillips, and I'm from Deutsche Post DHL, and I head up the sustainability topic within the real estate division. And as an organisation, we're committed to reduce the impact our business has on the planet, with the goal to becoming carbon neutral by 2050. I think for me, often it's felt like sustainability was treated as a nice to have, but I think the good news is that's now changing. And I think going forward, you can't be a profitable business unless you're a sustainable business. And I believe that closer collaboration, we can all be successful. And for me, events like today 100% promote working more closely together to achieve that common goal.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then last but definitely not least, Dr. Lee Kinberg of Maersk North America.
Hi, I'm Lee Kinberg. I'm head of environment and sustainability for North America for Maersk, which is a global logistics and shipping company. What an exciting time to be part of the shipping industry and to be dealing with supply chains. We're feeding and supplying the world and dealing with new challenges every day. And at the same time, we're actually starting to make progress on what's really the challenge of the century, and that is climate. We and over half of our biggest customers have set zero carbon goals, and we're actually working together, starting to make progress on that goal. And that's something you really have to be into.
Fantastic. And I can definitely feel the passion of our panelists as we talk about this. Now, I'd like to dive a little deeper, and I'm going to start with a question for you, Hugh. In March of this year, DHL announced it will invest up to 7 billion euros in climate neutral logistics by 2030, which includes the deployment of 80,000 vehicles for last mile delivery, which would mean approximately an electrification of your fleet with 60%. What opportunities and challenges do you see in pursuing and achieving these, if I may say, very bold targets?
Yeah, it certainly is a bold target. And the reason why we've come out with that commitment, Henrik, is that we're going to use that 7 billion to keep to reduce our carbon emission from 33 million tons in 2020 to under 29 million tons by 2030. And thereby we're committing to the Science-Based Target Initiative. In real estate, we're going to use it to make sure that all our new builds going forward are designed to a carbon neutral design. And we currently have an aircraft fleet of just over 250 aircraft. We're continuously modernizing that fleet. But going forward, we need to invest more heavily in sustainable aviation fuels. And we've got a target by 2030 that 30% of our aviation fuels are sustainable aviation fuels using blending. And as you quite rightly said, on the vehicle side, we need to make sure that 60% of our last mile fleet are electric. I think purchasing electric vans, that's well on track, and that's really well supported by the investment that's being made by the major car manufacturers. But that kind of brings up the first challenge for us in real estate, in that we need to make sure that we've got buildings that have a power infrastructure to charge all of those vehicles. And that's really a big step change up that I don't think a lot of people have kind of woken up to yet. Also, like many other companies, we're investing in solar, but in many areas, we're a nighttime business, and we need to bring on board new solutions like battery storage much faster into play so that we can capture solar and utilize it when our operation needs it at night. So yes, the 7 billion is a build commitment, but for me, it sends a strong signal of our intention.
Yeah, fantastic. And I hope that we'll have time to come back to your point on infrastructure, because that is so true and so core to what we do here at Prologis as well. Also related to significant investment required in infrastructure, Dr. Kinberg, Maersk recently has been in the news. Several companies, including Amazon, Unilever, IKEA, have committed recently to zero emission shipping by 2040. Now that might seem quite a way away, but given the massive investment required in technology and infrastructure, the scale involved in the supply chain, that's not a lot of time. Could you tell us a little bit more about what Maersk, as a global, one of the global leaders in shipping, is doing to support your customers?
Well, and you make a good point. For those of us in capital intensive businesses, 2040 is not a far distant or fluffy goal. The lifetime of a vessel is 20 to 25 years. So if you do the math, this is the decade of action. Not 2030, not 2040, but this has to be the decade of action. So we've announced that our first 8 vessels powered by green methanol will be on the water in 2023 and 2024. The very first feeder vessel will be during 2023, which last I checked was 2 years away. That's a stretch goal, but we're pretty excited about it. And again, these vessels will operate on green methanol, either biofuels or e-fuels, so that we're setting a full life cycle perspective on net zero carbon. We've also done a few other things. We've set a goal of zero carbon from all of our operations by 2050. And we're starting with our ocean fleet. We also have done some things internally that have really been effective. We pulled everybody involved in decarbonization, whether it was data or engineers or strategy people, even marketing people, into one team, reporting to one global head of decarbonization who reports directly to the C-suite. Now that really sends a signal throughout the organization, and it's given us the ability to reach out and partner with customers and other stakeholders in ways that we hadn't been able to before. So it's really been exciting to see how that's enabling us to move forward more quickly.
Fantastic. And working closely with customers is so essential to making these larger, complex infrastructure projects work, of course. Another thing that's really essential to getting us to where we need to be, I think, are strong public-private partnerships. So Congresswoman Berrigan, I have two questions for you. The first one being the need for massive infrastructure investments have recently been in the news globally. Could you tell us a little bit about what we're doing in the US, what Congress is working on to promote the adoption of clean technologies in the logistics sector?
Well, you're probably hearing a lot about the Build Back Better agenda, which is what Congress is working on. Now, two major steps we're taking in the Build Back Better Act is to invest in the charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles and in zero emissions technology at our ports. An important part of encouraging faster electric vehicle adoption in our goods movement sector is to increase access to charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. Now, the Build Back Better Act makes a $6 billion available for the installation of electric, medium, and heavy duty vehicle charging equipment. And it's also available for electrification of equipment at ports. It can help to accelerate electrification of larger vehicles, including delivery vans, port and airport vehicle fleets, and including trucking fleets that take cargo from ports to warehouses. Yeah. Many of the fleets can operate a single battery charge during the day and then recharge at one location overnight where they're stored, such as a truck yard. Now, this can have a real impact. While medium and heavy duty vehicles make up only 5% of the vehicles on the road, they emit 23% of all transportation emissions. So the Build Back Better Act also has a $3.5 billion grant and rebate program at the EPA to help ports be able to invest in and get a rebate program for zero emissions technology, such as electric cargo handling equipment and trucks and shore power for ships. So combined with the charging equipment investments, the Build Back Better Act investments can help our government partner with the private sector to reduce emissions in the goods movement industry at our ports, our warehouses, and in between.
Fantastic. And I'm definitely happy to see the focus not just on passenger vehicle consumer infrastructure, but also into the medium and heavier duty logistics space. Because in order for us to get to where we need to be from an emissions perspective, as you rightly point out, that's where a lot of the impact is. What opportunities do you see for us as corporations to partner closely with legislative organizations, with public organizations to build those strong public-private partnerships?
Well, we need government and private sector companies to work together to develop the low and zero emission solutions to large cargo ships. Now, this is one area where the technology isn't yet close to economically available to move large ships away from burning bunker fuel and diesel, which are increasing source of emissions as trade takes place. Now, there are different possible solutions out there that haven't been fully developed at scale for cargo ships, such as batteries, hydrogen, advanced biofuels, green methanol, ammonia, all have potential, but they also have drawbacks that need to be addressed to be sustainable economically and environmentally. But we must get there, and we can't afford to wait till 2040 or 2050. But we're going to need a partnership between the Department of Energy and industry to do research and development, as well as demonstration projects. Now, one idea my staff and I are looking at is to support and creation of an advanced technologies loan program for zero emission shipping to support manufacturers of zero emission shipping vessels, as well as manufacturers of the materials that would support them. So we need more companies to work on all aspects of zero emission diesel development and fuels across the maritime supply chain. And I think this kind of public-private partnership is an effort that could help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And building on that, Eric, Your firm, you and your firm are kind of in the middle of all of this, and as you're advising your clients on sustainable mobility and energy, you're kind of in the middle of that regulatory dynamic space and working with companies to figure out how they can achieve their sustainability objectives. How do you see companies and regulators ever like balance the near-term desires and investor drive for quarterly results and earnings with sustainable outcomes? That's been a real challenge over the past decade. Is that different now? Or have they become more compatible? What do you think?
We're getting there, but as many of the others said, we're not getting there fast enough, right? That's the world that we work in, is to try to balance the very aggressive, bold goals that need to be implemented in relatively short periods of time. As I think Lee mentioned, 2040 in a capital intensive business, that's tomorrow. And that's pretty much the case with a lot of companies that we work with that have thousands and thousands of trucks, dozens or hundreds of yards, a lot of people that are critical to this transformation, right? So finding that balance is really key. And I think that's the case, along the lines of the question you asked, between the regulators who are pushing hard, and certainly we see that very, very clearly here in California, where we have a very aggressive regulatory environment at the local and state levels to try to push businesses to do more, to get there faster. But I think it's really critical that the regulators, even though they want to get there and set bold policy agendas, that we also pay attention to the business and what they have to lend to the conversation about, how real is this? How sustainable is it from an economic perspective? I know the environmental piece is great, but there needs to be all parties paying attention to that balance so that these companies can thrive and continue to be successful, participating in the economy, employing the labor, and obviously doing their part environmentally as well.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Dr. Kinberg, Hugh, as Eric's talking there about that balance, you've been working in sustainability, both of you, for quite a while. How do you reflect on how those dynamics have changed?
I think Hugh mentioned earlier that sustainability or environmental compliance or all of the safety issues used to be an extra box that had to be checked. And what you see today, it is much more integrated into your main business strategies. And it's become a C-suite issue. It's no longer some little staff department that, yes, you have to fill out this survey once a year or something like that. It is actually becoming integrated into the business strategies. And I can barely keep up with some of our business units that are investing in electric vehicles, working with Prologis, as a matter of fact, to how do we get these chargers installed quickly. The marine terminals that are going to hybrid and then fully electric cargo handling equipment. And then what we're doing with our vessels, it's a lot going on. And it's because there's so many people now who have ownership for this and integrating it into the business and into the strategy.
Hugh, I think Hugh's on mute.
I absolutely support what Lee said there. We've seen a step change, and it really is picking up momentum. And now the big challenge we've got to do is make sure that we have the capability, the resources, we bring on people so that we can deliver on our commitments and make sure we keep that momentum going and grow on that momentum.
Yeah. Henrik, I might add, G&A, we've been around for 28 years at this point, working in sort of this spider web of technology and corporate fleet, regulatory policy, incentives, all these sorts of things. And I think, from my perspective, and we've seen this in the last couple of years, there's been a real foundational change. Not only do we have, increased regulatory pressure, which I think is one of the three key pillars of the energy transformation that we're starting to see, but the other two, I think, are absolutely critical, and they've been touched on here. One is this corporate commitment around sustainability, right? This is no longer a nice page on the website for marketing, right? These are real commitments to get to net zero by 2035, 2040, 2050, right? They're all in that sort of general time frame of the next 2 to 3 decades. And that will, I think, only increase. Certainly, we'll see starting on Sunday, And for the next week, I'm sure we'll see a lot of coming out of the COP26 conference and more commitments. But these are very, very big and bold and clear commitments to say, I'm going to get to zero emission by 2035. Every single truck I have will be zero emission, right? And there's sort of no going back when you make big statements and press releases like that. So that's one. And then the other one, which I think really gives me a lot of hope, is the investment that we're seeing these days in zero emission technologies of all shapes and sizes is like nothing we have ever seen. There are billions and probably trillions of dollars of capital being pushed in this direction. If you look at just Ford as one example, in the last couple of months, they've publicly committed $53 billion to their electrification strategy. GM, Freightliner, all the rest have done the same, right? You're seeing massive amounts of private equity and venture capital and SPACs and big funds like BlackRock and others that are saying we're going to invest in this path. And you see a lot of these startup companies out there, whether it's Arrival or Rivian or a number of these new electric vehicle companies that are starting up. And then back to the corporate sustainability, you're seeing the customer saying we're going to commit money to this, right? So you have the buyer and the seller both committing billions of dollars to say this is what I want. And that marriage is really, really critical and something that we maybe haven't seen in the past, or maybe you have an interesting, innovative technology that might get a policymaker excited and you see a little bit of investment to develop it. But unless you have that customer to say, I'm going to go buy this at scale and convert my fleet of 15,000 delivery trucks or whatever that is, it's hard to make it work at scale. And so those things all sort of coming together, to me, I think is sort of the perfect storm that will really help to ensure we get through this transformation to a zero emission future in the next couple of decades.
Yeah, that
Henrik,
definitely resonates.
do we have time for a quick example?
I think we have time for one. Yeah, absolutely we do. Please go ahead.
I mentioned the 8 new vessels that we'll be launching in 2024. Those are the vessels that are the big size that calls Port of Los Angeles, the Congresswoman's district. Those 8 vessels are going to cost us $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
But when fully operated on green methanol, they'll cut our carbon footprint, which is also about 33 million tons. They'll cut it by 1 million tons a year.
Right.
So it's a big investment, but it's the start of the fleet turnover.
Yeah.
So the numbers are big, but the payback is big too.
And we got a similar thing in DHL that we're now enabled. We've just recently placed our first order for 12 fully electric aircraft, and we'll take delivery of the first one in 2024. Of course, the early adopter, these won't be, the payload of these aircraft is relatively small, but it's moving us into technologies that we weren't in and didn't have anywhere on the horizon in the past. And that's the really exciting thing moving forward.
Yeah, fantastic. We're really seeing that marriage now between technological advancement, the economics working out, and a much greater societal push for cleaner technology. So absolutely not business as usual. Looking at the clock, I'm going to hand over to Tracy and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Well, building on what the panel has been talking about, climate change and cybersecurity threaten an already vulnerable power grid. What can organizations do to mitigate the risks of relying more heavily on electricity in their sustainability initiatives?
That's a wonderful question. Would any of our panelists like to try and tackle that?
I'll be happy to jump in to start. And, as we help these big corporate fleets move increasingly to electric vehicles, the question, especially in California, is, well, what happens when the power goes out? How do I make sure I can go out and run my routes, right? And so our strategy there is to say, number one, let's be smart about the sites that we choose. A lot of the companies that we work with, they have maybe 12, 24 sites or whatever it is in California. Let's not pick the one that's out up against the foothills where the wind blows and you have these power safety shutoffs, right? Let's pick the ones that are more in the urban areas where you're less likely to have these sort of brownout events or shutoff events. That's number one. Number two, the power does go off every now and then. That's just the nature of the beast and the world that we live in. And so we then sort of say, well, what can we do to have maybe some on-site generation, right? And a lot of projects that we're working on now, maybe we'll put in a megawatt and a half of solar generation on site. even in big fleet yards, you can't seem to get much more than that. Just real estate and California real estate prices, particularly in urban areas, right? And then package that up with some energy storage on site. That's not going to give you 24/7, 100% reliability and redundancy and generation, but it buys you time to get through an event, which we can look at and work with the utility partners to say, hey, look, at this site, historically over the last decade or whatever the time frame is, how often does the power go out and how long does it go out for? Because that's what I need to then plan for. I don't need to be planning for a week shutdown, right? That's just not reasonable or realistic. But let's think about it in a logical and smart way and sort of design for that. So that's sort of our approach and how we've been working with customers at this point.
I think you've
Great. If
also
I
got
can,
to look at.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Hugh.
I think you've also got to look at potentially new technologies that are coming over the horizon. Recently, we've seen in the news Toyota are exploring hydrogen as a way of powering their vehicles. So maybe it won't all be kind of where we see it going currently. There could be some further advancements in technologies that kind of take us down and can even out and balance out that risk.
Yeah, a lot of really great points there. I think to your point, Eric, the sizing of energy infrastructure on site is a really critical, with space being at such a premium, really critical area for innovation, as is resiliency as a whole. I think we might have time for one more question.
Yep, I've just got one more. I think I already know the answer to this, but the panelists might have an opportunity to put a finer point on the question. Can we have smart cars and trucks without smart roads and ports?
That's a great question.
Yes. But it's better if everything is smart.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think our panel before this touched on a number of those concepts as well. And I think that we'll see an increasing degree of autonomy and autonomous vehicles working into our infrastructure. I think over the next few years, we'll see a lot of different pilot developments in this particular space, and that'll give us a lot of learning in terms of how we're going to build the networks and the infrastructure that we can then scale up. Any further comments on this point?
I would just add, we're in an age where there is no more going it alone, right? And partnerships are so critical to absolutely all of this, whether it's the connectivity, where you need to have coordination, cooperation between a port and the tenants, or the truckers, or a city, or even on the last topic we were talking about, right? Sort of resiliency. You might have a fleet, and down the street might be a UPS facility. And one of the things that we do a lot of is say, look, power goes out for you, come on over, charge up, right? Because we're all in this together. And, as I'm sure Lee would agree, a high tide floats all boats, right? And that's, we have to be thinking like that these days around cooperation and doing this together, because doing it alone is just not going to get us there fast enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point of partnerships, we're all in this together. These are the supply chains, energy infrastructure are very, very interdependent, complex systems. And to your point, we cannot do this alone. So thank you so much for joining us. And I want to close us off with a final lightning round. The four of you have so much experience and knowledge in this space. Others might just be getting started with their sustainability journey. Could you, in just a few words, provide a bit of advice for those who are just setting out to set their priorities, thinking about their challenges? What would you like to leave the audience with? And if I can start again with Congresswoman Barragan.
Well, thank you. I would say to the audience, make sure you have an honest and transparent accounting of how you're reaching your sustainability goals so that you're achieving real measurable reductions in emissions, and also maybe set the goals for 2030, not just 2050.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Eric?
It's easy, hire a good consultant, of course. No, in all seriousness,
I happen to know.
My advice is dive in, get started, start doing something. Don't analyze it to death. Just start making investments and learn by doing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Hugh?
I think as well, yeah, you have a long-term goal, but you need to cut that into pieces, and you need to kind of have stages to get there. And the great thing is there's so many other companies in the same boat. So you just need to reach out to other organizations, to other industries, and you can really find a lot of inspiration and work together. Collaboration is the key.
Super. Dr. Kinberg.
But there's a common theme here. First of all, manage for the best total result. You don't want to just push the emissions upstream or downstream or to other parts of the supply chain. You've got to look at the total impact of what you're doing. Measure what matters. And then, as we've all been saying, we can't do this alone. We've got to partner, we've got to work with new stakeholders, but there are opportunities out there to work in ways, both public, private, and across business, and even with researchers and academics, to lead us to this new tomorrow. And the first
Fantastic.
steps are already taken, so we can do this together.
Well, thank you so much. Definitely recurring theme around partnerships. We're going to do this together. There is no time like today, and definitely there's an urgency today that is even greater than it was 10, 20 years ago. And the economics and the regulatory drivers are real. These objectives of 2040, 2045, due to the long-term nature of energy infrastructure, deep investments required, today is the time to get started. And I like the comment as well as just get going with a project. So thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Tracy.